So welcome back to Deano's garage for the VFR750 RC36 project. Now, as we know, this is bike number 2. I say as we know, but it is, trust me, bike number 2. What we're going to be doing today is actually tackling putting a replacement radiator and oil cooler back on this bike, because they were both damaged from the accident of this bike and also due to the sort of age and corrosion of the other first bike. Those parts are no longer any good. I have had two come back to me now in the post, one being the oil cooler, two being the radiator to put back onto this bike, so we're going to be tackling that. But before we do that, I'm going to take the opportunity to have a look at the spark plugs. Obviously, being a V4 engine, we've got front two that we can see, the other two point to the back of the bike. We'll have a look at the spark plugs here just because we can. Then we're going to clean the top of this cylinder head just because we won't be able to do it once the radiator's in the way properly, and also take the opportunity to tackle this exhaust pipe. So as you can see, it's a bit rusty, not so great looking. Most of it won't be seen when all the fairing's in place, but just to take the opportunity really to help prevent more sort of rust, we're going to be spraying it black, and then we'll get that radiator and oil cooler back in place. Let's get cracking. So first up is to pop the lead off. 1, 2. Certainly on the front cylinders, when you haven't got the radiator in the way, this is very easy. So what I'm going to do is drop the tube down into here and undo the spark plug, see what it looks like. So on this particular bike, as you can see, I've removed both plug caps. You need a nice long tubular type plug remover. Can be shorter, as you can see, but because I've got the clearance of the radiator, I can put that on there. Got a 19mm socket, and plug should never be very tight, so always have quite a low torque. So there you go, that's virtually, I could have probably almost undone that with my fingertips. Arguably that was a bit too loose, but as long as it doesn't work its way loose, it's fine. But yeah, that was very low. Should be a rubber grommet in the tube, and what should happen is that spark plug sits in the rubber grommet, and then as you release it should come out with it. Now it's not, but I'll get my nose pliers. Again, all this is remarkably easy because I don't have anything in my way. So there's our spark plug that we've just removed. Looks clean and fine, don't see any problems. A little black and sooty, but then arguably that's because the bike's not been run for very long. Now whilst I've got the opportunity, I'm just going to check the spark plug gap, and it should be around about 0.8 to 0.9 mils. So first one we got on the feeler gauge here is a 0.813, and that fits perfectly. And if I try the 0.89, because we're meant to be between 0.8 and 0.9, it doesn't quite fit, so we know that that's probably about a 0.85 gap on that spark plug between the gaps there. So yeah, absolutely perfect. So I'll slide that back in, and we'll just check the other one now. And like I say, it really isn't much more than sort of finger tight. So as you just begin to feel it tighten, I'm going right to near the center point of the wrench. If I come out too far, I'm putting too much torque on it, so I'm right near the centre, so I can get a much better feel for its tightness. And that's it, that's all I'm doing. Just a sort of not even a quarter turn beyond finger tightness. Again with this side. Again, very loose. I would arguably say that that was too loose. I've never known plugs to be, you know, when you undo plugs to be so loose like that. Feeler gauge says it's absolutely perfect. I'll just give it a bit of a wipe and then pop it back in. So what did I learn from just checking these plugs? One, that they're in good condition. Two, the gap was absolutely fine. But three, I would say they were slightly too loose in here. Now that again is me doing that up finger tight. And then just a little turn beyond that, but they are now a bit tighter than they were before. Cap back on, make sure it pushes and sits, and you should feel that sort of clicking down of the cap like that, and then just make sure it's right down, and then that rubber cap sits against it. I always get a bit paranoid that they need to go a little bit further, but that feels absolutely fine. Yeah, it's not going down anymore. If you just give it a little tug, gentle tug, otherwise you'll pull it off again. It shouldn't come off, and that isn't, so that's good. And that's it. And it just needs a little bit of cleaning just to make it look a bit better, and then we'll get on and do these pipes. So that's that, nice and clean. Now what I need to do, having cleaned the pipes off as well, they're wet, no good to spray them wet obviously, is I need to apply some heat. So what I'm going to do is plug in my old trusty hairdryer and get some heat down on these pipes, dry them off before I then heat up the spray paint and then spray that over here. Of course I'll be masking off and using paper to cover areas, but it's pretty windless today, so I'm taking this opportunity to get them sprayed whilst I can. Now one little trick that I do use, it's not particularly warm today, so we're going to be using this PJ1 Fast Black, which is for those exhaust downpipes. What I'm going to do is use my hairdryer to warm this paint up. It's been in a garage. Arguably what I should have done is put this in the house overnight and let it get to room temperature before bringing it out. The problem is if you try and use it when it's cold, the pressure drops. You don't always get a good spray out when the pressure's too low. So what I'm going to do is warm it up with the hairdryer on the outside of the can. That'll warm up the paint, build up the pressure, not too much mind you, but build up the pressure, and then we can apply this paint once warmed up, on the can at least, to those downpipes. Let's get on and warm it up now. So I've masked up around the area. This isn't going to be any sort of anywhere near any sort of professional paint job. All I want to do is get a bit of black paint on here, so aesthetically it looks better if you can see through the fairings to these pipes, and it will just help protect it a little bit on this front face. So that's the first coat. We'll let that dry off and then we'll come back in and then just apply another couple of coats. So as we know, we have the issue with the radiator and the oil cooler, and we need something to replace those parts. So in here we're going to have a look now, and hopefully we have got one decent oil cooler and one decent radiator that we can use today to get onto this bike here. Let's have a look. So there's our oil cooler. Looks absolutely fine. Obviously we have these parts to go back on. There's an O-ring in this one, but there's an O-ring missing from this one. We'll take the O-rings off the other and put it back on. Technically you should replace the O-rings with brand new, as always per the instructions when doing these things, but I'm sure we'll be fine with that. So, yeah. And there's our replacement radiator. So paint is pretty good. There's actually ironically had a little whack here, but nothing of any consequence. That's absolutely fine. All looks good. Obviously what we need to do is we need to take our fan off of what was on this bike's rad and put it on here. There's the little alley stem that comes out of there, so we won't bother with that. We'll just put this pipe straight back onto the expansion vessel. We'll assume that this is good and not a problem with that. I might unwind that and put our other one back on, but yeah, all looks pretty good. Needs a little bit of a clean through with a hose just to blast out this dirt that's in there. But the plastic grill on the front all looks good and clean, nothing broken off of it, so happy with that. Not too expensive. Obviously could have done without buying one at all, but such is life, and we'll get that back on this bike today. And this is what our rusty old brown exhaust pipes now look like. So the downpipes look pretty nice now, to be honest. You know, it's a nice satin black, and yeah, look a lot better than they did before. And like I say, that's all been cleaned up, so this isn't about perfection, but it is about taking the time before putting parts back on that had to come off in the first place to just make them look that much better. And that is kind of a lot to do with what Deano's garage is about, or has been about so far. You know, it's just taking time and making good what you can. So we'll get on now and we'll get this radiator back on. Right, before I put the front subframe on, which holds the clocks in place, I just took advantage of the fact that there's nothing in my way to clean around the fork stanchions to go into this lower yoke area, which was showing a little bit of sort of surface rust on that area, and get some of that T-cut black like I did with the VN 900, and just basically get in there and clean it and work it into the surface. Clean those lower fork tubes with some auto sole polish. Like I say, take advantage of the fact that you've got clearance to do so it doesn't become nooks and crannies that you can't really get to when you've got fairings in the way and subframes in the way and all sorts of stuff. If you're going to get to this point, take advantage of it, clean what you can when and where you can, and then start to rebuild. That took me probably 10-15 minutes just to give that a good clean, and you know, I won't have the opportunity, all being well, to get back to that area ever again. So I've got the subframe back on now, all in place, bolted up here. Needs a few more bolts each side, which I'll do before I carry on putting the radiator on. But yeah, the subframe needs to go on first because the radiator in part bolts to this subframe. So I'll finish off putting those bolts in, and then we'll get the radiator on, and also the oil cooler goes on here. Right, now we're back to the oil coolers. So we have here the original off the second VFR and the replacement we saw come out the box. let's get on and change the parts if we need to, and we'll get it on the bike. So this is our nice clean one off of the second VFR, but as you can see, this all got dented and squashed down, but other than that it was in really nice clean condition. Bit of a shame, but what we're going to do is we're going to take off the breather pipes. I've already taken one off there. We'll take this breather pipe off, and then we'll remove these O-rings, and this is our one from yesterday that we got in the post. Not quite as nice condition, ironically. It had a very slight crease there, but as you can see, there's no sort of squashing here. Yeah, the sort of bits in the middle here are slightly pushed in, but that's no big deal. The air just needs to pass through and cool those, and it will do in most of that, so that won't be an issue. So we'll get these pipes on here, take this old sort of skanky looking one off of here, and we'll put that on, clean this up a bit, and then put those nice clean O-rings into here, and then we'll get it on the bike. Right, what I am doing actually here is where these fins were slightly sort of damaged, something had hit it and pressed it and you couldn't see daylight through it. I've actually taken the tip of the screwdriver, this flat, very fine flat bladed electronic screwdriver, and basically all you need to do, this is just folded aluminium, just get your screwdriver tip in there, and where it is folded in, just try and open it up so you can see a bit more daylight through. So then you know that the air can pass through as well, and in effect that's all you need to be doing. So yeah, I won't mess about too much, but that's better now than it was before. And on the back as well, it's pretty clear. So yeah, now I can put those O-rings in and put the pipes on and get it onto the bike. So that's the oil cooler back on in place, bolted into place. You've got the double bolts each side and then the single one in the middle. These double bolts take the hoses which run down into the engine, and obviously it just circulates through and cools through here. The radiator is now on in place, got both hoses on, so now it is just a matter really of connecting these electrical items back up through, put the wiring loom back up through this, and then we can start putting the clocks back in place. So as I say, this is the second, if you like, RC36, the one that we're going to be doing up and taking parts off the first one and putting onto. Now from this side, this wheel looks really nice, it's lovely and white and just like it should be, period 1991 VFR750F. But if we go around the other side, we can have a look at why this wheel is actually for the scrap bin, unfortunately. Let's have a look. Now if you look down here, I don't know what this brown is on here, it doesn't rub off, it's from when the bike ended up being damaged originally, but you may be able to see that this has had a whack on this side here. The paint's actually cracked off where it's distorted the alloy of the wheel and the rim drops in. So it's had a real good smack there, unfortunately, and hard enough to damage that wheel to the point where, in all honesty, it probably is only good now for the scrapyard. Then we can unbolt this one and put that other one back in its place. So just got to wait a few days now, get that off, and then hopefully by the end of the week, the weekend, we can put the new one back on here in its place. Right, so what I've done is I've removed the wheel off of this bike. This is the first RC36 that we had. That horrible grey, sort of silver looking, late 90s kind of vibe to it. Let's just remind ourselves what that looked like. So yeah, as you can see, I mean, it's been badly painted, just sprayed over with that sort of graphite grey sort of paint straight onto what was probably the nice white wheel, and really doesn't look very nice. So yeah, that's now been removed. The wheel was really tricky. I had to use this brace which comes with your RC36, which should be tucked up here just behind the battery, and then what I did is I used my rubber mallet and gave this a good whack in a sort of cross fashion until all the wheel nuts became loose. Took a lot of bashing, but basically that technique works really well to shock them loose with the rubber mallet. So yeah, that wheel's now off, and what we want it to do is end up looking like the lovely white wheel on our second RC36, and we need to paint the one that come off of here to look just like it. Let's have a look. Right, so I'm going to drop the wheel into these guys now, and I'll come back and pick up the wheel, and hopefully it'll be exactly as we need it to be, just like on that second bike is now, without obviously the bent rim. So let's get on and take that into these guys, and I'll come back in a few days and collect it. Right, so here we are just a few days later. The guys here have been brilliant. They've got this wheel turned around really quickly. So as I say, blasted off all of that horrible silver paint, took it down to bare metal, and then have finished it in this beautiful Honda gloss white finish, which looks just like our front wheel on our VFR750, their second bike. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. Take a closer look. So that's it now, finished. We can get this back, bolt it onto the second bike, and yeah, we're good to go now with two lovely white period looking 1991 VFR 750 RC36 wheels. So keep watching Deano's Garage, and we'll move on with the RC36 ×2 project. Thanks for watching Deano's Garage.